I stood in Dad's living room, holding his 70th birthday cake, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in months. The house felt different today, charged with whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. My brother Danny raised his beer bottle, grinning like he just won the lottery. "Pack your bags, loser. This house is going up for sale next month." The room erupted in cheers and raised glasses. My hands shook as frosting slid off the tilted cake onto my shoes. I set the ruined cake on the coffee table, my mind spinning like a broken washing machine. Dad sat hunched in his wheelchair, his eyes fixed on the floor tiles while Danny continued his victory speech. The man I'd spent 2 years caring for after Mom died wouldn't even look at me. "Finally gonna get what we all deserve from this place," Danny announced, spreading his arms wide like some twisted game show host. The living room that once held Christmas mornings and birthday parties now felt like a courtroom where I'd already been sentenced. Aunt Martha clapped her pudgy hands together excitedly. About time someone with sense took charge of this situation. Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting years to say those words. Uncle Roger bobbed his balding head approvingly, his thick glasses reflecting the overhead light. "Danny's been handling everything since your father's stroke anyway." Natural progression of responsibility. The betrayal sliced through my chest like a rusty blade. This wasn't some spontaneous decision made in the heat of birthday celebration. This had been planned, orchestrated, rehearsed. Cousin Jenny, who'd borrowed $3,000 from me last Christmas, pulled out a manila folder thick enough to choke on. Real estate brochures spilled across Mom's antique end table. "We already found Dad a lovely assisted living facility," she chirped with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. "Sunset Manor has excellent reviews. Much better than him rattling around this big old house with just you for company." The words hit me like physical blows. Everyone had been meeting, planning, deciding Dad's and my future without us. How many family dinners had doubled as strategy sessions? How many phone calls had I unknowingly interrupted? "The paperwork's already started," Danny continued, pulling out a stack of documents that looked official enough to fool anyone who didn't look too closely. "Dad signed power of attorney over to me 6 months ago. Smart move, considering his condition." My stomach dropped into my shoes. Dad's stroke had affected his mobility and speech, but his mind remained sharp as a tack, or so I thought. Had I been wrong? Had I missed signs of mental decline while focusing on his physical therapy? "You never contributed anything anyway," Aunt Martha added with vicious pleasure. "Living here rent-free, no job, no prospects. We all know you've been taking advantage of his generosity." The accusations poured over me like scalding water. How dare they? I'd given up my apartment, my social life, my dating prospects to move back home. I'd learned to cook meals that accommodated Dad's dietary restrictions. I'd driven him to every doctor's appointment, every physical therapy session, every social gathering where he could maintain connections with friends. "Remember when you borrowed money from Dad for that art school nonsense?" Uncle Roger sneered, his words dripping with decades of stored resentment. "Never paid him back, never amounted to anything. Just another drain on family resources." Jenny nodded enthusiastically. "And that time you crashed his car? Cost him thousands in repairs and insurance increases." They were rewriting history, painting every normal family interaction as evidence of my parasitic nature. The car accident happened when I was 19, driving Dad to the emergency room when Mom had her first heart attack. The art school loan had been Dad's idea, and I'd paid back every penny with interest. But facts didn't matter in this kangaroo court. They'd constructed a narrative where I was the villain, and they were the heroes swooping in to save poor Dad from my evil clutches. "The realtor says we can get at least $400,000 for this place," Danny continued, his eyes gleaming with dollar signs. "Split 7 ways. That's over 50 grand each. Dad's care will be covered by Medicare and his pension. 7 ways. They'd already counted me out of any inheritance, any consideration, any family connection. I was less than nothing to them now, just an obstacle to be removed before the real business could begin. Sandra, Danny's girlfriend of 6 months, emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming mug. "Here's your evening tea, mister." "Peterson," she cooed, approaching Dad with the practiced sweetness of a nurse who knew she was being watched. "Your special blend, just how you like it." Dad accepted the mug with trembling hands, his movements slower and more labored than usual. When had his condition gotten worse? When had I stopped noticing the subtle changes? "See how well Sandra takes care of him?" Jenny pointed out. "She's got real training in elder care, not like some people who just wing it." The insult stung because it contained a grain of truth. I'd learned Dad's care through trial and error, love and dedication rather than formal training. But I'd thought that mattered more than credentials. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Danny shrugged with callous indifference. "Not my problem anymore. You're 32 years old, Carlie. Time to figure out your own life instead of leeching off family." 32. The age when most people had established careers, marriages, homes of their own. Instead, I'd spent the last 2 years in this house, in this bubble of caregiving and grief, watching Dad slowly recover while the outside world moved on without me. "Maybe try those women's shelters downtown," Aunt Martha suggested with mock helpfulness. "I hear they have job training programs for people in your situation." My situation. Like I was a homeless drug addict instead of someone who'd sacrificed everything to keep this family together after Mom died. The celebration continued around me, as if I'd already vanished. Uncle Roger was already planning his share of the money, talking about finally taking that cruise to Alaska. Jenny discussed paying off her credit cards and maybe buying a new car. They divided Dad's life's work like vultures picking over roadkill. Dad sat silent through it all, occasionally sipping his tea but never meeting my eyes. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up all night helping with my science fair projects, who'd cried when he walked me to my first day of kindergarten, now treated me like a stranger, who'd overstayed her welcome. Was this what defeat felt like? This hollow aching in my chest where my heart used to be? This sensation of watching my life burn down while everyone I'd ever loved threw gasoline on the flames? The room spun slightly as the full impact hit me. I had nowhere to go, no money saved, no job prospects. My college friends had moved on with their lives years ago. I'd turned down dating opportunities because Dad needed me. I'd declined job offers in other cities because I couldn't leave him alone. Now I was about to lose everything I'd sacrificed for, and the people celebrating my downfall were the same ones who'd benefited from my sacrifices for the past 2 years. Danny raised his beer bottle again. "To new beginnings," he announced, "and to finally getting this family's finances back on track." The toast echoed around the room as my entire world collapsed in real time. As the family continued their macabre celebration, something nagged at my consciousness like a splinter under a fingernail. Dad's behavior tonight wasn't just unusual, it was completely out of character. The man who'd argued with his doctor about every medication now sat docile as a lamb, accepting whatever was handed to him. I watched Sandra return to the kitchen, her movements too purposeful for casual helpfulness. Something about her demeanor triggered alarm bells I hadn't known I possessed. Following my instincts, I drifted toward the kitchen doorway, staying close enough to observe without being obvious. What I saw froze my blood solid. Sandra stood at the counter with Dad's pill organizer open beside her, carefully crushing white tablets with the back of a spoon. She measured the powder into a small paper cup, then stirred it into a fresh mug of tea. The methodical way she performed this task suggested she'd done it many times before. "Just something to keep him calm during the transition," she murmured to herself, then noticed me standing in the doorway. Her face shifted from concentration to saccharine explanation without missing a beat. "Oh, Carlie, the doctor prescribed some new anxiety medication for your father's confusion. Helps him process big changes without getting agitated." My mouth went dry as sandpaper. "What kind of anxiety medication?" "Oh, medical names are so complicated," Sandra waved dismissively. "Some sort of mild sedative. Perfectly safe for someone his age and condition. But I'd attended every single one of Dad's medical appointments for 2 years. I knew every pill he took, every dosage adjustment, every side effect to watch for. No doctor had prescribed any new anxiety medications. I pushed past Sandra to examine the pill bottles lined up along the counter. The labels made my knees buckle. Risperidone, quetiapine, lorazepam, heavy-duty antipsychotics and sedatives that Dad had never been prescribed for anything. Where did these come from? I demanded, my voice cracking with growing horror. Danny picked them up from the pharmacy this morning, Sandra replied smoothly. Your father's been so agitated lately about all the changes. The doctor thought it would help him adjust. Lies. All lies, wrapped in medical-sounding justification. I stormed back into the living room, clutching the pill bottles like evidence in a murder trial. Danny, what the hell are these? My brother glanced at the bottles with practiced nonchalance. Dad's new meds, doctor's orders. He's been getting increasingly confused and combative. Sometimes medication is the kindest option for everyone involved. Combative? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad hasn't been combative about anything. And since when does he see doctors without me? Since I became his power of attorney, Danny replied with smug satisfaction. I can make medical decisions in his best interests now. Sometimes family members too close to the situation can't see what's really needed. The gaslighting was so smooth, so rehearsed, that I almost questioned my own memories. Had Dad been agitated? Had I missed signs of decline? Was I the one who'd been blind to his deteriorating condition? But then I looked at Dad more carefully. His pupils were dilated despite the bright living room lights. His head lolled slightly to one side as if he was fighting sleep. His hands, usually steady despite the stroke, trembled as he held his mug. How long has he been taking these? I pressed. About 6 weeks, Jenny chimed in helpfully. Right around the time Danny started handling his medical care. Amazing improvement in his cooperation level. 6 weeks. That coincided perfectly with when Dad had stopped questioning family decisions, stopped arguing about his care, stopped being himself. I'd attributed it to depression after Mom's death, natural aging, recovery from his stroke. I'd never considered that someone might be systematically drugging him into compliance. You've been poisoning him, I whispered, the full scope of the betrayal hitting me like a freight train. Aunt Martha laughed with genuine amusement. Poisoning? Don't be so dramatic, Carlie. It's proper medical care from people who understand elder needs. Not everyone can handle the responsibility of caring for aging parents. Some people get overwhelmed and start seeing conspiracies where none exist, Uncle Roger added with the patronizing tone of someone explaining reality to a child. It's actually quite common in caregiving situations. The stress can cause paranoid thinking. They were turning my legitimate concerns into symptoms of my own mental instability. Every question I raised became evidence of my unfitness to care for Dad. Every objection I voiced proved their point that I was too emotionally invested to see clearly. Look at him. I gestured desperately toward Dad, who sat slumped in his wheelchair like a broken marionette. Does this look like someone making clear-headed decisions about his own life? He looks peaceful, Sandra observed with professional detachment. Much less anxious than when you were managing his care alone. Sometimes love means accepting that others might know better. Danny pulled out a thick folder I hadn't noticed before. Here are all the medical records from his new doctor. Detailed assessments of his cognitive decline, recommendations for medication management, evaluations of his living situation. Everything properly documented by licensed professionals. The folder contained official-looking documents with medical letterheads and professional seals, but reading them made my blood pressure spike. They described a Dad I didn't recognize, agitated, confused, potentially dangerous to himself and others. They recommended immediate medication intervention and supervised living arrangements. This isn't him, I protested, waving the papers. Whoever wrote this has never spent 10 minutes with our father. Dr. Martinez has extensive experience with stroke patients, Danny replied smoothly. Sometimes family members are too close to recognize deteriorating conditions. Denial is a natural response to watching a loved one decline. Dr. Martinez, not Dad's longtime physician, Dr. Williams, who knew him for 20 years. A stranger who'd apparently diagnosed Dad based on Danny's descriptions rather than personal observation. "When did he see this Dr. Martinez?" I demanded. "Private consultation," Uncle Roger interjected. "Medical privacy laws protect patient confidentiality, even from family members who think they're entitled to every detail. But I was more than a family member. I was Dad's primary caregiver, his medical proxy, according to documents we'd signed together after Mom's death, unless those had been superseded by Danny's forged power of attorney. The room felt like it was closing in on me, as the conspiracy's scope became clear. They hadn't just planned to steal Dad's house, they'd systematically drugged him into compliance, falsified his medical records, and manipulated his legal status to make their theft appear legitimate. "You're all accessories to elder abuse," I said quietly, my voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. The celebration paused for a moment as my words sank in. Then Aunt Martha burst into laughter. "Elder abuse? We're trying to save him from neglect and provide proper care. If anyone's been abusive, it's the daughter who kept him isolated in this house instead of getting professional help." "Professional help like drugging him unconscious?" I shot back. "Like ensuring he gets appropriate medical supervision for his condition," Jenny corrected. "Not everyone can handle the complexities of elder care. There's no shame in admitting you're in over your head." They had an answer for everything, a justification for every abuse, a way to make me look like the unreasonable one for objecting to their systematic destruction of Dad's autonomy and dignity. But I'd seen the pills being crushed. I'd watched Sandra dose his tea. I'd read the medical records describing a man who bore no resemblance to the father I'd cared for daily. Whatever game they were playing, they'd underestimated my determination to protect him. Looking at Dad's drugged, vacant expression, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family wanted to play dirty, they were about to discover just how dirty I could get. I walked toward the front door, with purpose in every step. "Where are you going?" Danny called after me. "To make a phone call," I replied without turning around. Just one quick call. The last thing I heard before stepping onto the porch was Sandra asking if Dad wanted more tea. The cool evening air hit my face like a slap of clarity as I stepped onto the front porch. The house behind me pulsed with celebration while my world crumbled around my feet. But something deeper than desperation drove me toward Mom's old sewing room. Call it instinct, intuition, or plain desperation. I needed to find something, anything, that could help me understand how my family had become strangers overnight. Mom's sewing room had remained untouched since her death 2 years ago. Dad couldn't bear to sort through her belongings, and I'd respected his grief by leaving the space as her memorial. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume, and the cedar sachets she'd tucked into every fabric bin. I'd searched this room countless times for important papers, insurance documents, anything that might help with Dad's care. But tonight, driven by a fury I'd never experienced before, I examined every corner with the intensity of a detective at a crime scene. Mom's antique sewing box sat in its usual place beside her Singer machine, the same rosewood box her grandmother had brought from Germany in 1912. I'd looked through it before, finding only the usual sewing supplies, fabric samples, and pattern pieces. But desperation made me more thorough this time. Running my fingers along the box's interior, I felt something unusual, a slight gap in the felt lining near the back corner. Pressing gently, I discovered a hidden compartment that opened with a soft click. Inside lay a sealed manila envelope, yellowed with age but still intact. My name was written across the front in Mom's careful script. "For Carlie only, in case of emergency." My hands shook as I broke the wax seal. The first document made my legs give out completely. I sank into Mom's sewing chair, staring at a will dated 6 months before her death. The legal language was clear and unambiguous. I, Margaret Ellen Peterson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my 50% ownership of the family residence at 1542 Maple Street to my daughter, Caroline Marie Peterson, in recognition of her dedication to our family's welfare. But there was more. Much more. A letter in Mom's handwriting explained everything I'd been too blind to see. My darling Carlie, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me and Danny is showing his true colors. I've known about his gambling debts for 3 years now. I've watched him manipulate your father's generosity and seen him steal small amounts from our accounts when he thought we wouldn't notice. I've documented everything because I knew this day would come. The pages that followed contained a comprehensive record of Danny's financial crimes against our family. Forged checks totaling $18,000. Unauthorized use of Dad's credit cards for casino cash advances. Even theft of Mom's jewelry, which he'd pawned and reported as lost to insurance. Mom had been building a case against her own son, knowing he would eventually escalate his schemes. She'd consulted with attorneys, gathered evidence, and prepared legal protections for Dad and me, all while maintaining the facade of a loving mother who trusted her children equally. I gave copies of all this evidence to my attorney, Barbara Hoffman, with instructions to contact you if anything suspicious happens after my death. Her number is below. Danny doesn't know about any of this, but I suspect he's been planning something for when your father and I are both gone. My tears spotted the paper as I read Mom's final paragraphs. I'm sorry I can't protect you and Dad directly from what's coming, but I've done everything legally possible to ensure you'll be safe. The house will belong to you, free and clear. The evidence against Danny is documented and witnessed. You won't be defenseless when he shows his true nature. The next document was even more shocking. A legal transfer deed, properly notarized and filed with the county, showing that Dad had quietly signed his half of the house over to me 18 months ago. The transfer was legitimate, legal, and completely unknown to Danny. I didn't just own half the house. I owned it entirely, but Mom's preparations went beyond legal documents. Hidden beneath the papers, I found an old cassette recorder and 3 tapes labeled with dates spanning the last year of Mom's life. With trembling fingers, I inserted the first tape. Danny's voice filled the room, recorded without his knowledge during what must have been a family dinner. Once the old man kicks the bucket, I'll have power of attorney over everything. Carlie won't know what hit her. She's always been too trusting, too stupid, to see how the world really works. I'll sell the house, stick Dad in the cheapest nursing home I can find, and disappear with the money. Maybe Vegas, maybe Florida. Somewhere far from this boring small-town life. The second tape was even worse. Danny discussing his plans with Sandra, detailing how they'd drug Dad into compliance and manipulate the rest of the family into supporting their scheme. He laughed about how easy it would be to convince everyone that Carlie was an unfit caregiver. The third tape captured a conversation between Danny and someone named Marcus about gambling debts and threats of violence if payments weren't made soon. Danny owed over $200,000 to people who collected debts with broken bones rather than lawyers. Mom had known. She'd seen it all coming and prepared accordingly. But the final surprise lay at the bottom of the envelope. A business card for Detective Ray Thompson, Crimes Against the Elderly Division, with a handwritten note. Contact me if Danny follows through on his plans. We've been watching him for 2 years. 2 years. The police had been investigating Danny since before Mom died. I stared at the evidence spread across Mom's sewing table, my mind reeling with the implications. Mom hadn't just been a loving wife and mother. She'd been a strategic protector who'd anticipated this exact scenario and built defenses I never knew existed. The house behind me still echoed with celebration, while I held the power to destroy every aspect of Danny's scheme. Mom had given me weapons I'd never expected, and allies I'd never known I had. Standing in her sewing room, surrounded by the evidence of her love and foresight, I finally understood what I needed to do. The phone call I was about to make wouldn't just be for help. It would be the first shot in a war Danny never knew he'd already lost. Mom had taught me one final lesson from beyond the grave. Sometimes love means preparing for battle against the people who claim to love you most. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Detective Thompson's card. Detective Ray Thompson answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Thompson here. Detective Thompson? This is Carlie Peterson. I think you knew my mother, Margaret Peterson? A pause. Then his voice sharpened with interest. Carlie, I've been waiting for your call for 2 years. Are you somewhere safe to talk? I'm in Mom's sewing room. The family's in the living room celebrating my eviction from Dad's house. Detective, they're drugging him. I know. We've been building a case against your brother since your mother first contacted us. She was a remarkable woman, Carlie. Smart as a whip, and determined to protect you and your father from what she saw coming. The relief of being believed, of having my reality validated by someone in authority, nearly brought me to my knees. What do I need to do? First, stay on the line. I'm conference calling Assistant District Attorney Barbara Hoffman right now. She's been coordinating the legal side of this investigation. Within seconds, another woman's voice joined the call. Carlie? Barbara Hoffman. Your mother was my client for the last year of her life. She prepared extensively for this exact situation. You knew this would happen? Your mother predicted it almost to the letter. Danny's gambling debts, his plans to steal your inheritance, even his strategy of drugging your father into compliance. She documented everything, and we've been waiting for him to commit enough crimes to guarantee a long prison sentence. Detective Thompson's voice took on a harder edge. What your family doesn't know is that Danny is wanted in connection with similar schemes in 3 other states. He's been running a sophisticated elder abuse operation for at least 5 years. We've been building a federal case. My head spun trying to process this information. Federal case? Wire fraud? Identity theft across state lines? Conspiracy to commit elder abuse? Your brother isn't just stealing from your father, he's part of a pattern that's destroyed dozens of families. We've been tracking him for 18 months. Attorney Hoffman continued the explanation. Your mother's evidence gave us the foundation, but we needed him to commit the actual crimes before we could arrest him. Tonight, with witnesses present, he's finally given us everything we need. What about the rest of my family? They're all celebrating this. Conspiracy charges for anyone who knowingly participated in defrauding an elderly person. In this state, that's a felony with mandatory minimum sentencing. Your family members just made themselves accessories to multiple federal crimes. Detective Thompson's tone grew urgent. Carlie, I need you to keep everyone in that house for the next 20 minutes. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? How? Go back inside. Act defeated. Don't let on that anything has changed. We're en route with Adult Protective Services, a medical examiner to test your father's blood for unauthorized medications, and federal agents to arrest your brother on the outstanding warrants. Outstanding warrants? 3 states, multiple charges. Danny's been busy. Your family's celebration is about to become a crime scene. Attorney Hoffman added, Carlie, you need to know something else. The house has legally belonged to you for over 18 months. Your parents transferred ownership to you through a family trust that your brother knows nothing about. Every plan he's made to sell it constitutes attempted real estate fraud. The irony was devastating. Danny had been planning to steal something that already belonged to me, with the help of family members who would now face federal charges for their participation. One more thing, Detective Thompson continued. Your father's medical records from Dr. Martinez are completely fabricated. We've been monitoring that clinic for months. They specialize in creating false documentation to support elder abuse schemes. Your father has never been examined by Dr. Martinez or anyone else at that facility. The magnitude of the conspiracy was staggering. This wasn't just family greed. It was organized crime with multiple victims across several states. Are there other families going through this? Dozens, Barbara Hoffman replied grimly. Your brother and his network target elderly people with assets and manipulate their families into supporting the theft. Your mother's documentation is helping us identify other victims who didn't have her foresight. How did Mom figure it out? She hired a private investigator when she noticed money missing from your father's accounts. The investigator uncovered Danny's gambling debts and connected him to similar schemes in other cities. Your mother spent the last year of her life building a bulletproof case against her own son. The sacrifice Mom had made was heartbreaking. She'd known Danny was planning to destroy our family, and she'd spent her final months preparing our defense while maintaining the fiction that she trusted him. The stress of that knowledge might have contributed to her heart attack. 5 minutes out, Detective Thompson announced. Go back inside, Carlie. Act natural. This is all going to be over very soon. I walked toward the house on unsteady legs, my mind reeling with the knowledge that everything was about to change. The celebration I was returning to would soon become the scene of one of the largest elder abuse arrests in state history. Danny's voice drifted through the front door. Tomorrow we'll start clearing out Carlie's stuff. Maybe donate it to charity. She never had anything worth keeping anyway. Aunt Martha's laughter followed. About time someone taught that girl some life lessons. Maybe being homeless for a while will motivate her to make something of herself. They had no idea that their celebration was being broadcast live into a federal investigation that had been building for 2 years. Every word they spoke was evidence in their own criminal prosecution. I took a deep breath and opened the front door, preparing to face the family that had just destroyed themselves trying to destroy me. But this time, I knew I wasn't facing them alone. Mom's love had given me an army. I walked back into the living room with what I hoped looked like defeat rather than barely contained excitement. The family was still riding high on their victory, passing around papers they thought gave them ownership of Dad's life and property. If they only knew what was racing toward them through the darkness outside. Back so soon? Danny smirked, clearly enjoying what he thought was my helpless situation. Couldn't find anyone to take you in tonight? Maybe try calling some of those college friends who've moved on with their lives. I forced myself to look broken, defeated. I just needed some air. This is a lot to process. Processing is good, Jenny chimed in with mock sympathy. Sometimes we have to accept that our comfortable situations can't last forever. Time to grow up and face reality. Uncle Roger nodded sagely, playing his role as the wise family elder. Harsh lessons build character. Maybe this will be the push you need to finally make something of yourself. Their condescending advice made me want to scream, but I had to maintain my act for just a few more minutes. Instead, I looked at Dad, who sat slumped in his wheelchair with that vacant, drugged expression that had fooled me for weeks. But something flickered in his eyes when he looked at me. Just for a second, I caught a glimpse of sharpness that didn't match his supposedly medicated state. Was I imagining it, or was there more awareness there than anyone realized? Dad, are you okay? I asked, moving closer to his wheelchair. He nodded slowly, his movements still labored and delayed. But when Sandra wasn't looking, he gave me the smallest possible wink. So quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching carefully. My heart nearly stopped. Was Dad more alert than he'd been pretending? He's fine, Sandra said quickly, moving to intercept my approach. Just relaxed from his evening medication. Much more peaceful than he's been in weeks. But I'd seen that wink. Dad was communicating something, even if I couldn't understand what. Danny launched into another monologue about his plans for the house sale, but I barely heard him. I was focused on Dad, watching for any other signs that his condition wasn't what it appeared. Then I noticed his hand. While everyone else was distracted by Danny's speech, Dad was slowly moving his fingers in a pattern against his wheelchair arm. It looked random at first, but then I recognized it. Morse code. Something he'd taught me as a child during our camping trips. He was spelling out letters. PLAYINGALONG, playing along. Dad was pretending to be drugged while staying aware enough to communicate in code. But why? How long had he been doing this? Before I could process this revelation fully, the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the street outside. Multiple vehicles, heavy footsteps on the front walkway. Expecting more guests? Danny asked with mild curiosity, glancing toward the window. The doorbell rang with official authority. Not the casual chime of family visitors, but the insistent tone of people conducting business. I'll get it, I volunteered quickly, my pulse racing. But before I could reach the door, it opened to reveal Detective Thompson in full uniform, followed by 2 other officers, a woman in a business suit who must be Barbara Hoffman, and several people carrying medical bags and official-looking equipment. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly. Good evening, Detective Thompson announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I'm Detective Thompson with the County Police, Crimes Against the Elderly Division. We have warrants to search these premises and arrest Daniel James Peterson on charges of elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy." The living room exploded into chaos. Jenny dropped her beer bottle, sending glass and foam across Mom's hardwood floors. Uncle Roger's face went white as notebook paper. Aunt Martha actually stumbled backward into the wall, knocking over a family photo. Danny shot to his feet, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and growing panic. "There's been some mistake. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm caring for my elderly father. By drugging him with unauthorized medications?" Detective Thompson's voice cut through Danny's protests. "By forging power of attorney documents? By planning to fraudulently sell property that doesn't belong to you?" Sandra tried to edge toward the kitchen, but one of the officers smoothly intercepted her path. "Sandra Mills, you're under arrest as an accessory to elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud." "I was just helping with his medications," Sandra protested weakly, following doctor's orders. "Dr. Martinez doesn't exist," Attorney Hoffman announced, pulling out a thick folder. "The clinic you've been using is under federal investigation for creating false medical records to support elder abuse schemes." The family members who had been celebrating my downfall 30 minutes earlier now looked like they'd been hit by lightning. The speed with which their victory had turned to catastrophe was almost comical. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Dad suddenly straightened in his wheelchair, his movements becoming fluid and purposeful. The vacant expression vanished, replaced by sharp intelligence and barely controlled anger. "Hello, Detective Thompson," Dad said in a clear, strong voice that bore no resemblance to the slurred, hesitant speech we'd been hearing for weeks. "I think it's time to stop pretending." The room went dead silent. "You've been pretending?" Danny whispered, his face draining of all color. Dad reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder, setting it on the coffee table with a satisfied click. "Every conversation, Danny. Every plan you made to steal from me and betray your sister. Every detail of how you intended to drug me into compliance and steal my life's work." Aunt Martha sank into the nearest chair, like her legs had given out. "You were recording us?" "For 6 months," Dad replied with grim satisfaction. "Ever since I figured out you were all planning to destroy my family for money. I've been working with the police this entire time, gathering evidence against every single person in this room." Jenny's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "But the medications, you were so confused." "I spit out most of the pills Sandra gave me," Dad explained matter-of-factly. "Acted drug to make you feel confident enough to reveal your complete plan. You'd be amazed how much people will say in front of someone they think is mentally incompetent." Danny's face had gone from white to green. "But you signed the power of attorney documents." "I signed nothing," Dad stated firmly. "Every document you showed tonight is a forgery, which makes them evidence of felony fraud. I've been mentally competent this entire time, just disgusted by what my family was willing to do for money. The betrayal was complete, but not in the way anyone had expected. While we thought Dad was being victimized, he'd actually been orchestrating the downfall of everyone who'd planned to victimize him." Detective Thompson stepped forward with handcuffs. "Daniel Peterson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." As Danny's rights were read, I noticed Dad was looking directly at me for the first time all evening. In his eyes, I saw not the confused victim I'd thought he was, but the sharp, protective father who'd been playing the longest, most difficult role of his life. "I'm sorry you had to see this, sweetheart," he said quietly, while Danny was led away in handcuffs. "But I needed to know exactly who we could trust and who we needed to protect ourselves from. The family I'd thought I'd lost had never been lost at all. The man I'd been caring for had been caring for me all along, in ways I never could have imagined." The next hour unfolded like a perfectly choreographed disaster movie, except the people being destroyed were my own family members. Adult Protective Services immediately began documenting the medication abuse, while a medical examiner drew Dad's blood to test for the unauthorized drugs Sandra had been giving him. "The good news," the examiner explained, while preparing his samples, is that your father's been clever enough to avoid most of the medication. His blood work should show only trace amounts, which supports his testimony about spitting out the pills. Detective Thompson's team worked with methodical efficiency, photographing evidence, and interviewing family members who were quickly discovering that celebrating elder abuse in front of witnesses wasn't their smartest decision. Each of you who participated in planning this theft is facing felony conspiracy charges, Attorney Hoffman announced to the assembled relatives. Conspiracy to defraud an elderly person carries a mandatory minimum sentence in this state. Uncle Roger tried to claim ignorance. We didn't know Danny was breaking any laws. We thought everything was legitimate. You celebrated your disabled brother-in-law losing his home, Detective Thompson replied dryly. You toasted the eviction of his caregiver daughter. Ignorance isn't a legal defense for participating in elder abuse. Aunt Martha was crying now, her earlier smugness replaced by dawning horror at the consequences. We were just trying to help. Danny said it was all legal. Helping by drugging an elderly man and stealing his property? The detective's voice carried decades of experience with people trying to justify inexcusable behavior. Elder abuse is a federal crime, Mrs. Patterson. The FBI takes these cases very seriously. The mention of federal charges made Jenny start hyperventilating. Federal? But we never crossed state lines or anything. Your brother did, Attorney Hoffman explained, consulting her files. Danny Peterson has run similar schemes in Nevada, Arizona, and Florida over the past 5 years. This is part of a multi-state investigation into organized elder abuse rings. The scope of Danny's crimes was staggering. He hadn't just planned to steal from Dad, he'd been systematically targeting elderly people across the country, using the same methods of medication, manipulation, and family pressure to steal their assets. How many other families? I asked quietly. Dozens, Detective Thompson replied grimly. Your mother's documentation provided the breakthrough we needed to connect cases across multiple jurisdictions. Danny and his associates have stolen millions of dollars from vulnerable seniors. Dad spoke up from his wheelchair, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. Your mother figured out the pattern before she died. She'd been investigating Danny's activities for over a year. The revelation hit me like cold water. Mom knew all of this. She hired private investigators when she noticed money missing from our accounts, Dad explained. They uncovered Danny's gambling debts and traced them to organized crime connections. Your mother spent the last months of her life building a case to protect us from what she saw coming. Attorney Hoffman nodded. Margaret Peterson was one of the most thorough clients I've ever worked with. She anticipated every aspect of Danny's scheme and prepared legal countermeasures for each one, including the house transfer, Dad added with satisfaction. We quietly signed ownership over to you 18 months ago, Carlie. Everything Danny planned to steal already belonged to you. The irony was perfect. Danny had been planning to steal something that legally belonged to me, with the help of family members who were now facing prison time for their participation. Sandra was sobbing as they led her away in handcuffs. I was just following Danny's instructions. He said it was all legal medical care. You crushed unauthorized medications and fed them to an elderly man without his consent, Detective Thompson stated flatly. That's felony assault, in addition to the conspiracy charges. Jenny tried one last desperate appeal. Can't we work something out? We'll return any money, forget about the house sale. Nobody has to go to prison. You can't return money you never had legal access to, Attorney Hoffman replied. And you can't forget about federal crimes once they've been committed with witnesses present. The Adult Protective Services worker finished her documentation and approached me. Miss Peterson, your father's care has been exemplary under your supervision. There's no evidence of neglect or inadequate treatment. In fact, his recovery from the stroke has been remarkable. Recovery that was threatened by systematic drugging, Detective Thompson added. Without your father's intelligence in pretending to be affected while gathering evidence, this case might never have reached prosecution. Dad's performance had been Academy Award worthy. For months he'd convinced everyone that he was declining mentally, while actually conducting an undercover investigation into his own family's criminal conspiracy. How did you manage it? I asked him, still struggling to process the deception. Your mother taught me, Dad replied with a sad smile. She figured out Danny's plans before she died and coached me on how to protect us both. Every confused episode, every moment of apparent weakness, was carefully calculated to make them confident enough to reveal their full scheme. The family members who remained unhandcuffed sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation sank in. They'd gone from celebrating their financial windfall to facing federal prison sentences in the span of 1 hour. The worst part, Uncle Roger mumbled, staring at his hands, is that we actually believed it was justified. Danny made it sound like we were helping, like Carlie was taking advantage. Danny is a professional manipulator, Detective Thompson explained. He spent years perfecting techniques for turning families against their caregiving members. He identifies the person most dedicated to elder care and systematically destroys their relationships with other relatives. Jenny looked at me with something that might have been remorse. Carlie, I'm sorry. I don't know how we let him convince us that you were the problem, but apologies couldn't undo the damage. They'd celebrated my homelessness, toasted my humiliation, and actively participated in a scheme to drug Dad into submission. Their regret came only after getting caught, not from any sudden development of conscience. The investigation is ongoing, Attorney Hoffman announced. We expect to uncover more victims as we trace Danny's activities over the past 5 years. Several of you may be called as witnesses in additional prosecutions. The family that had gathered to celebrate Dad's birthday and my destruction was now scattered to lawyers, jail cells, and federal investigations that would define the rest of their lives. As the last of the evidence was cataloged and the final statements taken, I found myself alone with Dad for the first time in months. Really alone, without the performance he'd been maintaining, or the family members who'd been plotting against us. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. I hated deceiving you, but I couldn't risk them figuring out what we knew. Your mother made me promise to protect you no matter what it took. Looking at my father alert, strong, and fiercely protective, I finally understood the full scope of what my parents had done. They'd sacrificed their own comfort and peace of mind to build an impenetrable defense against the people who should have loved us most. The war was over, and we'd won more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. 6 months later, I stood in the same living room where my family had celebrated my planned destruction, but everything had changed. The house felt different now, not because of any physical alterations, but because it had become a true home again rather than a battleground. Danny received 15 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges spanning 4 states. The organized elder abuse ring he'd been part of was completely dismantled, with 17 people receiving sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years. Sandra got 3 years for her role in the medication conspiracy, though she maintained to the end that she'd been manipulated into participating. The other family members faced varied consequences based on their level of involvement. Aunt Martha and Uncle Roger each received 18 months in prison for conspiracy charges, their comfortable retirement years now spent behind bars. Jenny's sentence was reduced to 12 months, plus community service in exchange for testifying against other members of Danny's network. Her cooperation helped identify 6 additional victims in neighboring states. But the legal victories, satisfying as they were, paled beside the personal transformations that followed. Dad's recovery was nothing short of miraculous once the stress of maintaining his undercover investigation ended. Free from the drugs Sandra had been feeding him, and no longer needing to pretend mental impairment, he regained strength and vitality I hadn't seen since before Mom's death. His physical therapy progressed rapidly, and within 3 months he was walking with just a cane instead of relying on the wheelchair. The human body is remarkably resilient, his real doctor explained during a follow-up appointment. Your father's stroke was relatively minor. Most of his apparent decline was psychological stress from the investigation he was conducting. Now that it's resolved, his recovery has been extraordinary. The house that Danny had planned to steal became the foundation for something Mom and Dad had dreamed about but never had the chance to implement. Using the legal fund I'd established and donations from grateful families of other victims, we converted the first floor into a resource center for elder abuse awareness and prevention. The Margaret Peterson Center for Elder Protection opened on the first anniversary of her death. The irony was beautiful. The house Danny tried to steal was now permanently dedicated to protecting other families from predators like him. Dad threw himself into the work with passion I hadn't seen in years. He'd become something of a local expert on elder abuse, speaking at community centers and training sessions for social workers. His first-hand experience with both victimization and successful resistance made him a powerful advocate. The hardest part, he told a group of adult children at one of our workshops, wasn't being drugged or manipulated. It was watching my own family celebrate what they thought was my helplessness. But it taught me that family isn't about blood connections. It's about who stands by you when everything falls apart. I'd found my own calling in this work as well. My experience as a caregiver, combined with the legal knowledge I'd gained during the investigation, made me an effective counselor for other families facing suspicious relatives or questionable power of attorney situations. The most rewarding cases were the prevention successes, situations where we identified manipulation early enough to stop the abuse before it escalated. Every family we helped stay together felt like a victory for Mom's memory and Dad's courage. Barbara Hoffman became more than our attorney. She became a close family friend who often joined us for Sunday dinners. "Your parents' case was unique," she told me one evening. "Most victims don't have the foresight to prepare so thoroughly, or the strength to maintain such a convincing deception. They literally wrote the playbook for protecting families from internal predators. The financial aspects of our ordeal had resolved better than I'd ever imagined possible. In addition to owning the house free and clear, I'd inherited substantial assets that Mom and Dad had quietly protected in trusts Danny never knew existed. They'd been planning for years to ensure I'd be financially secure regardless of what happened to them. But money paled beside the relationships we'd rebuilt and strengthened. Real friends rallied around us during the crisis, and we'd formed new friendships with other survivors of elder abuse. The community of people who understood what we'd been through became an extended family, more loyal than blood relatives who'd betrayed us. Detective Thompson became a regular visitor, often bringing case files for Dad to review when they suspected organized elder abuse in other investigations. "Your father has an intuitive understanding of how these schemes operate," the detective explained. "His insights have helped us identify patterns in at least 12 other cases. Dad's expertise came from painful personal experience, but he transformed that trauma into a tool for protecting others. Watching him testify at Danny's sentencing had been one of the proudest moments of my life. He'd spoken with dignity and strength about the betrayal he'd endured, making it clear that the consequences were about justice rather than revenge. The most healing moment came 8 months after the arrests, when Dad and I finally felt safe enough to visit Mom's grave together. We'd been too raw, too angry, in the immediate aftermath to process her loss properly. But standing beside her headstone, we could finally appreciate the magnitude of her love and sacrifice. "She saved us," Dad said quietly, placing fresh roses on her grave. "Margaret saw what was coming and built defenses we didn't even know we needed. Even in death, she was still protecting her family." I thought about all the nights Mom must have lain awake, knowing her son was planning to destroy us, preparing legal weapons, while maintaining the fiction that she trusted him. The stress of that knowledge had probably contributed to her heart attack, making her sacrifice even more profound. "Do you think she'd be proud of what we've done with the center?" I asked. "She'd be amazed," Dad replied with certainty. "Your mother always said the best response to cruelty was to prevent it from happening to others. This is exactly what she would have wanted." As we walked back to our car, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point. A year ago, I'd been isolated and dependent, caring for what I thought was a declining father while being manipulated by relatives who saw me as an obstacle to their greed. Now I was financially independent, professionally fulfilled, and surrounded by people who valued my work and respected my contributions. The family that had tried to destroy me was scattered to prison cells and court-ordered community service, while the family worth keeping had grown stronger than ever. The experience taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Real love often works quietly behind the scenes, preparing protections you don't know you need, while false love makes loud declarations that disappear when they're tested by crisis. That evening, as Dad and I prepared dinner together in our kitchen in our house, I reflected on how completely our world had transformed. The man I'd thought I was caring for had actually been caring for me all along, in ways so sophisticated that I'd never suspected them. Looking at him now, animated and engaged as he told stories about his day at the center, I marveled at the deception he'd maintained for months. The vacant stare, the slurred speech, the apparent confusion had all been performances worthy of a master actor, but they'd been motivated by love rather than ambition, protection rather than manipulation. Any regrets? I asked him as we sat down to eat. Only one, he replied seriously. I regret that your mother didn't live to see how completely we defeated everything she was afraid of. She would have been so proud of your strength and so satisfied by the justice we achieved. Before we finish, I want to ask you something that's been on my mind since this all began. Have you ever had people in your life who claimed to love you but showed their true nature when they thought they could benefit from your loss? How did you find the strength to recognize the difference between real love and manipulation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for family, fighting back against betrayal, and finding the strength to protect the people who truly matter. And please share this with someone who might need to know they're not alone in dealing with family manipulation, and your share could be exactly what they need to find their own courage. Thank you for listening to my story, and for understanding that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones working quietly behind the scenes to keep us safe, even when we don't know we need protecting. Until next time, remember that real family is defined by loyalty and sacrifice, not by blood or loud declarations. Take care of yourselves and the people who truly love you.